In the quiet hours before sunrise, when the world is still painted in shades of blue and silver, a small Celtic village nestled in the Scottish highlands begins to stir. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and heather. Thin tendrils of mist cling to the thatched roofs of roundhouses, their outlines softened by the haze. The villagers rise with the light, their movements slow and deliberate. The first to wake are the shepherds, wrapping themselves in thick woolen cloaks woven in earthy tones, deep greens, browns, and muted blues. The wool, spun by hand and dyed with lichen and woad, is rough but warm, perfect for the unpredictable highland weather. Inside the roundhouses, the last embers of the night's fire still glow faintly. A woman kneels by the hearth, blowing gently on the coals before adding dried peat and kindling. The smoke curls upward, escaping through the small opening in the roof, mingling with the morning mist outside. Soon a pot of water is set to boil. Later it will be used for porridge, a simple meal of oats, crushed hazelnuts, and a drizzle of honey, if the hives have been generous. Outside, the village blacksmith stretches his arms, his hands calloused from years of shaping iron into tools and nails. His workshop, a simple lean-to with a stone forge, stands at the edge of the settlement. Today, he will repair a broken plow blade, the metal heated and hammered until it is whole again. Nearby, a child gathers twigs for kindling, their small hands deftly snapping dry branches. The mist lingers, as it often does in these glens. Some say it is just the way of the land, cool air settling in the valleys after the night. But the elders whisper of something older, something that moves within the fog. They say that if you listen too closely to the murmurs of the mist, you might forget the way home. But for now the village is awake, and the day's work begins. As the sun climbs higher, the village settles into its daily rhythms. The people of these highlands have always been shaped by the land, just as they shape it in return. Every tool, every garment, every meal is a testament to the slow, patient work of hands moving in harmony with the seasons. Near the edge of the settlement, the blacksmith's forge glows a deep orange. He works methodically, his hammer falling in steady, measured beats. The iron he bends was traded from distant hills, carried here in lumps by merchants who follow the old paths between valleys. Now it becomes something new, a sickle for harvesting grain, its curved blade sharp enough to slice through stalks with a single pull. The smith pauses to wipe his brow, his face illuminated by the coals. He knows that a well-made tool can last a generation, if cared for. Not far away, a woman sits cross-legged on a woven mat, her fingers moving in practiced motions. Before her, a drop spindle twists, drawing out thread from a bundle of raw wool. The fibers are coarse, taken from the hardy sheep that graze the rocky slopes. But when woven, they will become cloaks to keep out the chill. Her hands never hurry. Spinning is a meditation, the thread growing longer with each turn, each breath. In the fields, men and women bend to their work, their backs warmed by the sun. They use wooden sickles with flint blades, cutting tall stalks of barley and oats. The grain will be ground into flour between smooth stones, then baked into flatbread over the hearth. Some will be stored in clay pots, sealed with beeswax to keep out the damp. Others will be eaten tonight, dipped in broth made from wild onions and the last of the winter's salted meat. And always the mist lingers at the edges of the village, pooling in the low places. The elders say it is wise to speak softly when the fog draws near, to name your loved ones under your breath, so the mist does not steal them from your thoughts. But for now, the sun is bright and the work continues. As the amber sun dips below the tree line, the village transforms. The sharp shadows of day soften into twilight's blue embrace. Women return from the fields with baskets of late herbs, woodruff and sweet cicely, their skirts brushing dew from the meadow grass. Children carry armfuls of kindling, each step scattering the first fallen leaves of early autumn. The evening meal unfolds slowly, like the petals of the moonflowers that bloom by the river. In the round houses, families gather around central hearths, where iron cauldrons simmer with barley stew. The scent of smoked eel and wild garlic mingles with the earthy aroma of drying rushes underfoot. A grandmother grinds hazelnuts between two smooth river stones, the rhythmic scraping a familiar lullaby to the dozing dogs at her feet. Outside, the last light catches on the village's protective charms. Bundles of rowan twigs tied with red thread, iron nails hammered into doorposts, small clay figures of the horned one buried at thresholds. These are not placed in fear, but with the quiet certainty of generations who know the rules of coexisting with the unseen. As true darkness falls, the villagers perform their nightly ritual of remembrance. Each person whispers the names of their ancestors, the shape of their home's roof beams, the path from their door to the sacred spring. This is how they keep the mist at bay, by tethering memory to physical things. The blacksmith touches his hammer's worn handle. The weaver counts the threads on her loom. The shepherd fingers the notches on his crook, each one marking the lamb safely delivered. Tonight, like all nights, they remember, so the mist cannot forget. Just beyond the village, where the heather gives way to scraggly pines, the land begins to speak in stone. Here, the villagers walk carefully, not out of fear, but respect. Their footsteps fall lightly on the needle-strewn path that leads to the old places. The first marker is a worn boulder, its surface pocked by weather and time. To outsiders, it might seem just another rock. But the village children know its true name, Ankailach's kneeling stone, for the deep grooves in its surface resemble a giant's fingerprints. Further along, where the mist lingers even at midday, 3 slender standing stones form a crooked triangle. They are not tall, no taller than a man, but their presence hums in the bones. The villagers call them the 3 who remember. Each autumn, when the first frost silvers the grass, the elders come here to tie bundles of yarrow and mistletoe to the stones with undyed wool. The plants wither by winter, but the wool remains, faded ribbons that flutter like forgotten memories in the wind. At the center of the triangle lies a flat stone, its surface carved with spirals so old their meaning has softened with time. This is where the women come to leave offerings when a child is born. A lock of hair wrapped in linen, a bead of amber, a thimbleful of milk poured into the cracks. The stone drinks it all in without judgment. The most sacred place lies hidden, a spring that bubbles up between moss-covered rocks. Its water is always cold, always clear. Those who come here must first wash their hands in the shallow pool, then whisper their true name to the water. It is said that if you listen closely as the ripples fade, you might hear the spring whisper back. But the villagers never stay long after dark, for when the mist rises from the spring at twilight, even the stones hold their breath. In the golden light of late afternoon, when shadows stretch long across the packed earth floors, the village weavers perform their quiet magic. Their looms stand near open doorways to catch the fading sun, each thread strung with the patience of spider silk. This is where memories live, not carved in stone, nor written on vellum, but woven in patterns only the initiated can read. A grandmother works her shuttle back and forth, her hands moving without thought after 60 winters of practice. The wool is undyed where it crosses itself, the creamy white of raw fleece forming the background of the story. Then comes the brown of walnut-dyed thread, twisting into the shape of a standing stone. Next, a single red thread, madder root boiled with oak gall, marks the year the spring froze over. The pattern repeats, changes, grows. This is how they keep their history. Every village child learns the language of knots before they learn to speak in sentences. 3 tight loops at the edge mean birth. A braid left unfinished means waiting. A thread deliberately snapped means loss. The oldest tapestry in the village hangs in the chieftain's house. It spans 7 generations in wool and linen, its colors faded, but its story still clear to those who know how to look. In one corner, a black thread zigzags violently. The year lightning burned half the harvest. Near the center, a patch of blue so dark it's nearly black shows, where the great-grandmothers wove their grief during the plague years. The current weaver adds her own chapter now. Her fingers work a new pattern into the border, delicate swirls of pale green, the shade of new ferns in spring. It's been a gentle year. The sheep grew thick wool, the mist stayed low in the valleys, and no one forgot their child's name at the supper table. As dusk falls, she ties off the last thread with a special knot, one that says, "Remember this." Then she folds the cloth over the loom to keep the night dew from settling on her work. Outside, the first tendrils of evening mist curl around the doorframe. But inside, by the glow of the hearth, the woven memories remain warm and clear. As the last copper light drains from the sky, the village performs its most important ritual, the closing of the day. This is not done in haste nor in fear, but with the quiet precision of people who know that some doors must be shut properly. In each round house, women light tallow candles made from autumn-rendered sheep fat. The flames burn clean and blue at their edges, casting long shadows that dance across wicker storage baskets and stacked wool blankets. Now comes the careful arrangement of the night's defenses. A bowl of salt water by the doorpost, a sprig of freshly picked St. John's wort laid across the threshold, the family's iron cooking knife placed blade out beneath the bed. Children participate solemnly in these preparations. The eldest daughter sweeps the hearth clean of the day's ashes while whispering the names of her ancestors. A boy of perhaps 7 winters carefully turns all shoes to face the wall. "So the dead won't borrow them," his grandmother had told him when he was small. These are not superstitions, but habits as natural as breathing. The village herbalist makes her evening rounds, stopping at each dwelling to refresh the protective bouquets. Above doorways, last summer's dried mugwort and vervain get replaced with fresh cuttings of yarrow tied with red thread. She moves without speaking, her fingers working while householders pretend not to notice. For protection magic works best when unacknowledged. At the edge of the settlement, where the cultivated land meets the wild, old Fergus performs his nightly duty. He walks the boundary ditch, dragging a forked hazel branch behind him, The earth here remembers the plow, remembers the salt, remembers the 1,000 footsteps that say, "This far, no farther." When he reaches the northern marker stone, he pauses to place upon it a single copper bead, today's toll for safe passage through the night. Inside the homes, families share the last meal of the day. Barley cakes spread with goat cheese, wild greens gathered by moonlight, for they're sweeter then, and small beer brewed with bog myrtle. The conversation lingers on ordinary things: the blacksmith's new foal, the unusually large apples this season, the way the stream sounds different after yesterday's rain. No one mentions the thickening mist beyond the firelight. When the last embers sink into gray ash, the village surrenders to sleep, but not before preparing the proper vessels for dreams. Each pillow in the roundhouses tells its own story through feathers. The elderly rest their heads on goose down, soft and cloud-like, to encourage gentle memories of youth. Newlyweds share a pillow stuffed with grouse feathers, believed to whisper promises between lovers. But children's pillows hold the most careful mixture. 3 pheasant feathers for vivid dreams, 1 raven plume for wisdom, a single white owl feather to keep night terrors at bay. Old Nan, who remembers the great famine winter, keeps a special dream pouch beneath her pillow. Woven from unbleached linen, it contains a dried sprig of mugwort, a chip of amber, and, most importantly, the first milk tooth of each grandchild. "So their young dreams will guide my old ones," she explains whenever asked. The village takes dream interpretation seriously. A maiden waking with fern patterns pressed into her arm means good fortune in love. A farmer dreaming of swimming warns of coming rains. But certain dreams require immediate action. Dreaming of unspinning wool means one must reweave a friendship. Seeing a reflection with no face demands an offering to the spring. Hearing one's name called from the mist requires a day of silent remembrance. At dawn, while the porridge cooks, families share their night visions over steaming birchwood cups of mint tea. The weaver nods thoughtfully when her apprentice describes walking through a tapestry of living threads. The shepherd's son blushes as he recounts flying over the high pastures on black wings. These stories weave into the day's work, becoming part of the village's living memory. Only the blacksmith keeps his dreams to himself. His pillow contains no feathers at all, just buckwheat husks that crackle softly with every turn. The villagers say this is why his metalwork holds such strange beauty. He channels his unspoken dreams into the iron. There exists a fragile hour when night loosens its grip, but day has not yet taken hold, when sleepers hover between worlds, and the village holds its collective breath. This is when the mist grows attentive. The villagers call it Tide Naseo, the time of listening. Those who wake in this blue-gray limbo know better than to rise immediately. Instead, they practice the old ways. First, count 7 heartbeats. Then name 3 things remembered from yesterday. Finally, touch something woven, a blanket, a basket, your own braided hair. In the chief's house, a water clock marks these vulnerable moments. A pierced copper bowl slowly drips into a clay vessel. When the dripping stops, the dangerous hour has passed. The watchman assigned to tend it never looks directly at the water's surface, for some claim to have seen faces swirling in the pre-dawn reflections. This is when the village's cats earn their keep. They patrol the fog-draped lanes with unusual purpose, tails held high like living boundary markers. When a cat pauses to wash its face at a particular doorstep, the family knows to check their protective charms come morning. The baker uses this hour to start her sourdough, believing the mist lends the starter special potency. Her hands move slowly in the gloom, mixing flour with water from the sacred spring. The dough will rise wrapped in linen, embroidered with interlocking spirals, a pattern said to confuse forgetful spirits. At the village's edge, where the standing stones keep their eternal watch, the mist sometimes forms strange shapes. On rare mornings, the sentinels report seeing what looks like a second ghostly village reflected in the fog, one where the roundhouses stand empty, their doors swinging slightly in a wind no one feels. But as the copper bowl's last drop falls, the world settles back into place. The mist retreats to the low places. The cats return to their naps, and the village wakes properly, rubbing sleep from their eyes, as if the listening hour never happened at all. In the high summer, when the heather blooms purple across the moors, the village turns its attention to the hives. Honey here is more than sweetness. It is liquid memory. The beekeeper approaches the woven straw skips barefoot, his feet reading the earth like a blind man reads Braille. He hums as he works, a tuneless drone that resonates with the colony's own song. The villagers say this is how he negotiates with the bees, not as a thief, taking their gold, but as a scribe recording their summer's work. Each batch of honey carries distinct properties. Heather honey, dark amber, slow to crystallize, preserved for winter solstice rituals. Clover honey, pale gold, delicately floral, given to new mothers to strengthen their blood. Hawthorn honey, red tinged, faintly metallic, used only in remembrance ceremonies. The village's oldest woman keeps a special crock buried beneath her hearthstone. Inside rests honey harvested the year the great oak fell, a vintage now 40 summers old. When someone suffers a forgetting spell, as happens sometimes when the mist grows too bold, she administers a thimbleful mixed with powdered rowan berries. To root you back to yourself, she murmurs as the sufferer swallows. In the brewing hut, the mead maker tends her sacred fermentation. The clay vessels breathe through cheesecloth covers, their contents bubbling softly. She never writes down recipes. Instead, she ties knots in a length of hemp cord for each batch. A square knot for the honey's origin, a fisherman's knot for the water source, a braided section for the herbs added. The midsummer mead ferments with yarrow and meadowsweet, producing a drink so clear it's said you can see yesterday through it. During the winter feasts, when this vintage is finally uncorked, elders claim they can taste specific days of the departed summer, the hot afternoon when the queen bee swarmed, the thunderstorm that nearly washed away the hives, the golden evening when the heather glowed like embers. As autumn approaches, the villagers begin the ritual of telling the bees, whispering family news to the hives so the colony will remember during their winter sleep. A birth, a death, a marriage, all must be reported, lest the honey turn bitter with neglect. The last jar sealed each year always bears a special mark, a thumbprint in the wax. This one goes unlabeled, undiscussed. It waits in the back of the storage hut for the day someone returns from the mist with empty eyes and a mouth full of forgotten words. When the first hard frost silvers the thatch roofs each morning, the village begins its most sacred seasonal work, the slow knitting together of all their memories before winter's long sleep. The women gather in the chief's roundhouse, their laps full of undyed wool, their needles carved from deer bone and polished smooth by generations of use, click like crickets as they work. This is no ordinary knitting. Each stitch contains an intention, a pearl for every child born that year, a yarn over for marriages joined, a dropped stitch carefully memorialized for those taken by the mist. Old Nan leads the chanting as they work, her voice like wind through bare branches. She recites the year's events in a looping rhythm that matches their needles. Spring floods came late, the blacksmith's daughter wed at bluebell time, 3 lambs born under the crescent moon. Harvest yielded 40 baskets and 7. Meanwhile, the men prepare the village's physical defenses. They check every roof's thatch for weak spots, knowing the mist creeps in through gaps. They reinforce doors with extra iron nails, 5 to a panel, never 4. And along the boundary ditches, they bury small clay dolls stuffed with protective herbs, each one placed precisely where the summer's standing shadows ended at midday. The children have their own sacred task. Under the schoolmaster's watchful eye, they braid cords of colored wool, one for each household, to be hung above doorways. The patterns seem simple, but contain complex codes. Blue and brown chevrons for fishing families, green spirals for shepherds, red knots with spaced intervals for those who've lost someone to the mist. As the shortest day approaches, the village completes its final preparation. Every resident brings an item to the remembrance fire, a broken tool, a worn-out shoe, a child's first lost tooth. These aren't burned, but placed in a clay pot sealed with beeswax. The pot will sleep through winter, buried beneath the hearth of the chief's house, a time capsule of the year's ordinary miracles. On the winter solstice, when the night is longest and the mist presses hungrily against their doors, the villagers gather to share the memory honey. Each person receives a small cup of the 40-year-old vintage mixed with powdered mistletoe berries. As they drink, the knitting is passed hand to hand, each person adding one final stitch, their personal mark upon the year's collective memory. When the dawn finally breaks pale over frost-laced fields, the mist always retreats. And though no one can quite remember their dreams from this longest night, they wake to find the knitted banner hanging above the village square, its patterns telling their shared story in wool and intention, a tangible promise that some things at least the mist cannot take. Years turn like spindle whorls, generations pass like threads through the loom. The village remains. The standing stones still stand. The spring still whispers. The mist still remembers. But in the quiet hours when the fire burns low, if you press your ear to one of the old woven banners, you might hear it, the faintest echo of needles clicking, the ghost of a grandmother's chant, the enduring rhythm of a people who refuse to be forgotten.